You're listening to the Opening Bell bonus podcast, taking a look at all the action coming up this weekend, and it's a busy weekend across the globe as well. The rescheduled all-women's O2 bill, really looking forward to that. Marshall Shields and Mayor Baumgardner. We did preview this previously, the pod that was never aired 5 weeks ago. Here they are, back to do it all again. You've got Haney against Kambosos 2, a rematch down under. And, Matt, you've got the return of Deontay Wilder against Robert Helenius a few months on. What to expect from Deontay Wilder? You don't sense he's the sort of guy that will ever be gun-shy. You don't sense he's the kind of character who will ever doubt himself. But then when you've been through two torrid fights, one way or another with Tyson Fury, and you've been stopped quite emphatically in the last two of them, you never quite can tell when the threads are going to unravel, either physically or mentally, with any sports person, but particularly with any fighter. How are you thinking about the reappearance, perhaps the resurrection of Deontay Wilder and his career?
I'm pleased that he's back. Really pleased that Deontay Wilder's back. I think he's a crucial ingredient in a really good heavyweight division. But you say he's a crucial ingredient. It is all down to how much he has left. Now, of course, he's the wrong side of 35, which isn't always necessarily bad news, but the two fights that you mentioned there was the pummeling he took in the rematch with Tyson Fury, and there was the roller coaster nature of that third fight with Tyson Fury, one of the best contests that we've seen in recent years. Physically, I don't doubt he feels great. Mentally, we wonder. And we wonder what's been taken out of him as a consequence of that. And it would appear on the surface that Robert Helenius might be kind of the perfect foil for him to look good. Helenius is beatable. He's well regarded enough for it to be a victory that would be respected. It would be a very effective launch pad for Deontay Wilder to then get one of the big guys in his next fight. But you also wonder about this fight, and a really interesting kind of subplot in this. We spoke to Robert Helenius in this week's Boxing News, and he talks about the fact that he has sampled that right hand before. So many opponents that go into a fight with Deontay Wilder, it's an absolutely shocking discovery when they feel it for the first time. But Helenius has been used as a sparring partner by Deontay Wilder, most recently in the build-up to that third fight with Tyson Fury. And he says, yep, I've sampled it. I have no intention of sampling it again, but if I do, I'm going to be okay. And Helenius seems up for this in a way that he hasn't been for a while. He's got a bit of wind in his sails, hasn't he? Let's not forget that while Deontay Wilder was seeing his unbeaten record collapse against Tyson Fury, seeing his reputation as the hardest hitter in history being seriously questioned in those two fights, Robert Helenius has had two victories, the first one an upset against Adam Kanaki. And okay, Adam Kanaki is no Deontay Wilder, but just the way that he'll be approaching this fight will be perhaps different to the way that he approached fights against people like Gerald Washington, for example, in the past, or Dillian White. He will feel now that he has at last got this opportunity to fulfill what many of us thought was great potential in the early days. I remember when Robert Helenius came along and he was beating people. Was it Samuel Peter he beat in kind of shocking fashion back when Peter was still deemed a bit of a threat? And there was a feeling that, and it was Serhij Liakovic as well that he beat, wasn't there? And you sense that Helenius could be the real deal. Then I was out in Helsinki for that fight with Derek Chisora, when everybody thought that Helenius was going to win that and then go on to fight for a world title in his next fight. Now, he did. If you look at the record books, he did win it. But for me, at ringside, I thought that was a terrible decision. I thought Chisora controlled most of it, thought he deserved to win. And out in Helsinki at that point, I mean, that fight, when I was out there and I was looking at all the local newspapers, that was all over the newspapers. The fact that Helenius was fighting Derek Chisora, he's very much a national hero over there. So you think that Helenius is going to be absolutely bang up for this one. I think any suggestion that he's an old pal with Deontay Wilder, they're old sparring partners, he might just come here and roll over. Get rid of that. I think Helenius will be going for this one and going for it big time. And the question really is, how much does Deontay Wilder have left? Because if you compare Helenius to a lot of the fighters Wilder was beating before he was meeting Tyson Fury, and he had a trouble with some of them, I think he's on a par with those. So I think it's a really good first fight back for Deontay Wilder. He could have come in easier. I'm not saying he's got picked out the hardest possible opponent, but he could have come in easier than Robert Helenius.
So I suppose the big questions are, how would you have viewed this fight before Wilder's defeats to Tyson Fury? And is it any different viewing it now on the back of those?
Well, yeah, of course it is. I mean, I think if he'd have fought Helenius before he fought Tyson Fury, you'd probably be a bit disappointed he was fighting someone like Robert Helenius. I suppose if the question is, do you give Helenius more or less of a chance than you would have done back then I think it's probably about the same. I think if we're going to be really honest on this, Helenius has a puncher's chance. Unless Deontay Wilder is mentally ruined from those two fights with Tyson Fury, and he's already shown us that I personally was writing Deontay Wilder off mentally going into that third fight with Tyson Fury. I thought that after he had taken the beating that he took in that rematch, that the best of Deontay Wilder had long gone. But the manner in which Deontay Wilder performed in that third fight suggests that he's mentally strong. The only question marks, therefore, that I have really going into this is physically, how is he going to be holding up? Is there going to be any wear and tear? And if Helenius certainly has the power to hurt him. But as much as I've been impressed by Helenius early in his career, I've seen him in some absolute stinkers. Against Dillian White, for example, was just mind-numbing in the extreme. And Helenius' failure to change his approach in that fight was striking at the time. Go back and read my report. Dillian White was essentially doing exactly the same round after round. Going in the same direction, approaching from the same way. Yet Helenius made no effort or could not do anything to stop that. And if I'm going to be honest, Dillian White didn't exactly look like Muhammad Ali that night. But at this stage of Helenius' career, I make him a live underdog. Do I give him a chance? Not really. Would I have given him a chance a couple of years ago? Not really.
So mostly, it's 8-1 on, by the way, Wilder to win this fight. 8-1 on to win it. He is a short price favourite. He usually wins by knockout. He's always prepared to bide his time. We saw that against Ortiz. Doesn't matter if he's been outboxed. Doesn't matter if he's losing rounds. Doesn't matter if the clock's running down. Eventually, he tends to get you. And he did get Tyson Fury in a lot of bother in the first and third fights particularly. And probably, although spectacularly in the first fight, probably in some ways more hurt in the third fight, Tyson Fury. So we know that he can do that. Wilder, you suspect he'll find a way, he'll find the time, he'll find at least the moment?
I think one of the most interesting things about that third fight with Tyson Fury from Deontay Wilder's point of view was the fact that he looked so much better than he had done in the second fight, and even for large sections of the first fight. Now, you have to give Deontay Wilder the credit for that. I think you also have to give his trainer, Malik Scott, a bit of the credit for that. And I remember, I think you and I spoke about it in the podcast afterwards, that there was a feeling that we may not see Deontay Wilder again after that. He'd made himself a very, very rich man. There were suggestions that he'd rather now not box again, that he would rather spend time with his family, who he clearly adores. But we were also keen to explore the possibility that if that's what his relationship with Malik Scott can do after one fight, what happens if they can put together a run of a few fights together? Is the scope for Deontay Wilder, even in his mid-30s, to improve? And you can make the argument that there is. There is the scope for Deontay Wilder to improve. So, yeah, I think that we will see a better Deontay Wilder than we saw when he was fighting, when he first won the WBC championship, for example. And in some of those early defences, which were a little bit rickety, shall we say, where he was having trouble and taking his time and everything else. So I think that we will. I'm prepared to give Wilder the benefit of the doubt, and I think we will see an improved Deontay Wilder from that particular stage of his career. And I think someone like Robert Helenius could make him look very good indeed. So I think we might be a little bit excited about the prospect of Bronze Bomber Mark II this time next week. So, yeah, I suspect that Wilder will win inside the distance, and I think he may do it around the halfway mark. Let's not forget that Adam Kanaki, who was a not revered prospect, but he was a hyped prospect. He'd beaten some half-decent people on the way up, and he was expected to beat Robert Helenius. That's why Robert Helenius was brought in. But Kanaki gave Helenius some really hairy moments, particularly in that first fight. So you would think that Wilder could do the same here. I think the dimensions of Wilder as well will be a problem for Helenius. And I know they're kind of comparable. And Helenius is one of the few heavyweights that can match Wilder for size and wingspan, etc., etc. But for that reason, Helenius could struggle because it's not very often he's been in the ring with someone the same size as him. I just think Wilder's power will ultimately prove the difference, but I think he will look good in the process. I don't think, for example, it's going to be a fight like the second Luis Ortiz fight where Wilder was outboxed for 6 or 7 rounds and then all of a sudden just landed one shot and it's game over. I don't think it will be like that. I think Wilder will look like the boss pretty early on.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see whether there's any further improvements or just the continued development that we saw previously under Malik Scott. Really good point, that, Matt. That's what adds another layer to it, as well as just the lingering question, rather than doubt, lingering question about where Wilder's at mentally and physically. How much does he have left? Is he as good as he was? Those are all fair questions to ask. I think we're going to get a sense of that. Could he even improve? That's another question. We'll see and discuss that next week. Are we going to learn anything from Haney Kambosos, given what we saw first time around? You can never be dogmatic in sport, and particularly boxing. You can never say just because this happened before, it will happen again. But Kambosos is going to have to turn himself inside out.
Kambosos really surprised us. He surprised us all when he beat Teofimo Lopez. So the concept of him scoring a gargantuan upset, we shouldn't completely dismiss. Sorry, the prospect of, we shouldn't completely dismiss. But if you look at that fight, you look at every minute almost of every round, Kambosos really struggled with Devin Haney. It's a rematch that only Kambosos was screaming for. Fans wouldn't be wanting to see that again. But you're right to say that we shouldn't just write Kambosos off as a consequence. We don't know if there was anything, if there are any reasons for Kambosos for being off form. Often boxers will lose and we just presume it's a bad performance, and there can be all sorts of things going on that we never ever know about. Be it things that go on in their personal life, be it injuries, be it psychological strain for whatever reason. So we don't know. Maybe Kambosos was genuinely off colour the first time round. And maybe the second time, without the pressure, nobody really expecting him to do anything, he might thrive. I say all that, I would be very surprised. For me, this would be if he turns this around in the second fight against Devin Haney, it would be a much bigger shock than when he beat Teofimo Lopez. Devin Haney doesn't strike me as the kind of athlete to go into this and take it lightly, given what could potentially be awaiting him afterwards and the big fights that could be awaiting him if he gets through this one. Devin Haney won't be taking this lightly. And the smart money, all of the smart money has to be on, I think, a repeat of the first fight and another lopsided points win for Devin Haney.
Of course, Shakur Stevenson, now another one of those waiting prospect big fights, potential big fights at lightweight. Let's turn our attention to the O2 on Saturday on Sky, and that is the rescheduled, postponed fights between Marshall and Shields and Mayer and Baumgardner. We were so excited, Matt, and really looking forward to it. And it's such a shame that the events of the last week, I think, really have overshadowed what should be a momentous historic night for boxing and for the women's side of boxing. And you know, and you'll remember how we were feeling about this 5 weeks ago. And I suspect, and I think fans were getting into it as well. And I think they still can. I hope they still will. But maybe just the capacity to do so has just been slightly overshadowed and diminished by what's happened in the last week, which is a real shame if that's the case.
We record this on Wednesday, so we haven't seen fight week start to ramp up. My concern, looking at the interest in this fight in terms of who's looking at it on the website, who's looking at any social media posts in regard, is far less than they were looking at it back then. However, we are yet to see what they're going to do in the days leading up to the fight. And we may get to Saturday and it may be the event that it should have been 5 weeks ago. It's impossible not to feel a little bit of sympathy for everybody involved at this early stage, namely all of the fighters on the card who had, and let's not underestimate how difficult it would have been to go back for Claressa Shields, probably go back to America. And 5 weeks is a really odd period of time to kind of stay on the ball. They would have been in peak physical condition. Yet they have to somehow, in 5 weeks, not overtrain, not do too much, not risk an injury, stay on weight, stay focused, when everything was building to that one moment 5 weeks ago. Now, there was a temptation when we were talking about doing this podcast just to say, well, let's rerun the podcast that we recorded. Let's get that out there, the one that we recorded when we were full of beans and full of enthusiasm and full of excitement for it. But I do think that in at least one of the fights, one of the top two fights on this card, that the loser may come out, and it might be deemed an excuse, but with a very legitimate reason that for whatever reason in these 5 weeks they struggled. They struggled to get themselves back to where they were before. You feel sorry for the promoter Ben Shalom as well, who, when the board turned round and said that as a consequence of the Queen's passing, the fights are not going to go ahead, he didn't shout and scream and try and get it over the line, because he would have had a legal case to make as well, because nobody was being told that they had to. The government, the rules there were that sporting events can go ahead. We just advise that there is a tribute. But Ben Shalom didn't go out and start ranting and raving and trying to bend the rules so that his show could go ahead. And at the time, I remember thinking, well, it might work in his favour, because it would have been overshadowed by the death of the Queen had it gone ahead that weekend, I believe. It wouldn't have got much coverage in the media, in newspapers at all. And the feeling was that, well, if in 5 weeks' time they can come out all singing and dancing. But now, of course, they come out on the back of the Conor Benn scandal. And you do wonder if newspaper editors, if TV bosses are just a little bit drained from the events of last week to really want to be singing and dancing about this particular card. But in terms of just the action, if we just break them down, these fights are still exactly as appealing as they were 5 weeks ago. Nothing has changed. This Shields-Marshall fight is one of the best fights that can be made in boxing, full stop. It's fascinating. The backstory with Marshall beating her as an amateur. The only boxer to beat her in professional or amateur boxing, that's Savannah Marshall. Both of these coming into this fight after 15, 20 years in the sport. And it is still as hard to call now, I believe, as it was back then. So who do you pick? Who do you pick when you've got Claressa Shields, who has achieved more in both amateur boxing and she's achieved more in professional boxing than Savannah Marshall? She has operated at a higher level. She has fought the better opposition, again, at professional and amateur level. Shields has all of the gold medals, and although Marshall was an exceptional amateur, when you look at everything, despite the fact that Marshall beat Shields deservedly as an amateur, you're still kind of thinking that Claressa Shields has kind of been there and done it at world level, at elite level, is more conditioned at elite level and world level than Savannah Marshall is. Then you go back and you think, well, will there be any kind of mental problem from Claressa Shields' point of view, because she knows that the woman she's about to get in the ring with is the only person that's ever had the beating of her in a boxing ring. So I went back, and this is when I was originally previewing the fight a few weeks ago, and there's a really interesting piece, a really interesting quote from Savannah Marshall when she told BoxingNews after beating Shields, "When we watched the video of Shields fighting, she was really fast and strong. If you stay there, she's going to catch you. She's going to get you, unload on you with combinations. As soon as you've punched, move." And that's what I did. She kept falling short all the time and couldn't even catch me. I'm not saying it was an easy fight, but it wasn't the hardest fight of my life. There's bits and bobs in there that still ring true now in terms of how she has to approach this fight. But Shields has come on so much from their fight in 2012 to now that I personally wouldn't be using that amateur fight as evidence that Marshall has a greater chance of beating Shields. I always felt from the moment this fight was announced that Shields might just be a bit too clever and know a bit too much. And that is still, without knowing what both of them have been through in the last 5 weeks, that is still my point of view now.
Yeah, I think Marshall was the more experienced of the two at the time. Although Shields was being touted as the next best thing among the American female amateurs, Marshall had more than twice as many fights as Shields at that time. It is worth just putting that out there as context. And we know how much Shields improved after that defeat. In fact, never lost subsequently, including World Championships and 2 Olympic Games along the way as well. It's a fascinating matchup, Matt. And I'm not going to change my view on this fight. The other one, potentially. But this fight, I'm sticking to how I viewed it before, and that is, can perfectly see the possibility that Marshall, this is her party. This is the night when she really shows what she's all about. I've said before on this pod that I think she might be the female Tyson Fury. She's even better than she's looked so far, and she's looked pretty good. She does things slightly unusual, the way she moves. She's got freakish power. I think she's a very, very unusual fighter, Marshall. And I wouldn't be surprised if she's a special one. But Shields has done more, even although Marshall has beaten some of the same opponents more impressively. Shields, on balance, has done more, has a very, 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 very acute tactical brain, very, very skillful, very technical. And although she's going to have to get close and close the distance on Marshall to win this fight, I think she's got the brain, the nous, the tactics, and the mental approach to do exactly that. So I also always felt that Shields was just the call, with the caveat that potentially Marshall really could look something quite special, and this is the night that we really get proof of it.
Yeah, I mean, it could be the male equivalent of Joe Calzaghe versus Jeff Lacey. But I think Claressa Shields has got more about her than Jeff Lacey had. I think that's probably an unfair comparison, unfair on Claressa Shields, but let's not forget how highly we were regarding Jeff Lacey going into that particular fight. Few people were picking Calzaghe to win it. The obvious thing with Savannah Marshall, if you're picking Savannah Marshall, is the fact that the manner in which she does destroy opponents, which is quite rare in the female code, and she's looked dangerous throughout her career. There's the dimensions of Savannah Marshall as well, and Claressa Shields hasn't fought anybody with as big a reach or who is as tall, but she's fought someone who was very nearly as tall, I think half an inch shorter, and that was Christina Hammer. When Hammer presented one or two problems in the early going, and Shields quickly worked them out to largely dominate the fight. Really impressive. Christina Hammer is an exceptional fighter. Yet Shields dominated. And that, people forget, was supposed to be a bit of a coming out party for women's boxing. The fight was so one-sided in the end that it wasn't. Shields dominated that fight. And I wonder if Shields is going to do a similar thing against Savannah Marshall here. I think Savannah Marshall is probably too good to allow that to happen. I don't think we're going to see a 100-90 type fight, for example. Marshall has got to be on point in every round. And I said this last time, I don't subscribe to the notion that it's either Shields on point or Marshall by KO. I think if Marshall wins, she does it by boxing really tidily, really cleverly, getting Shields' respect early on. And I think if I was to pick Marshall, I would be picking her on points. But my pick will be Shields to win on points herself.
Yeah, me too. I think Shields is just too quick. But Peter Fury, with so much confidence, and what a job he's done with Savannah Marshall. I think instilling self-confidence in her, really short on that early on in her career. As an amateur, but not so anymore, brimming with it. I think Shields just too quick. Shields points my call too, but won't be surprised at all if it goes the other way. And moving on to the next fight, I'm really looking forward to, Matt, finally. Mikaela Mayer against Alycia Baumgardner. So not only is it a fantastic fight, but you've got the clash of personalities thrown into the mix as well. They were going at it wonderfully in the build-up to this 5 weeks ago. And I suspect it's going to be the same in the days leading up to this as well. And much of the talk, I think, in this one particularly will be how both these fighters have dealt with a break. I think Baumgardner, because she's still relatively young and inexperienced, and Mayer because of the weight, which is a significant issue. And that was something that we did talk about in the Unheard pod. But what I did 5 weeks ago was go down and speak to both fighters. Now, I was toying with the idea of doing it again. The reason I didn't is I just thought it would end up being focused solely or more on what's been happening in between, and just potentially that will stray us away from what's most important when we're discussing this fight. So we decided we'll play out those interviews anyway, because a lot of what was said, much of what was said 5 weeks ago, I think is still relevant. So let's dip into those. First of all, with Mikaela Mayer. How would you compare mindset, how you're feeling this fight week compared to some of the others you've been through?
Not too different. Obviously, this fight is a lot bigger, right? There's a lot more on the line now. I'm going for the WBC belt, trying to add that to my collection, one step closer to undisputed. There's a lot of hype around this fight. There's been a huge build-up, mainly because of the rivalry that me and Baumgardner have. So definitely, it's a bigger scale for sure. This fight is on a bigger scale, but I feel like I've had all the experience I need going into a fight like this. Physically in the ring, but like mentally and just when it comes to media and handling everything outside of the ring. So I feel fully prepared. I don't overthink it or stress too much about it. I put the trust in my training camp and know that I did the work, and I just got to go in there and perform.
And how much of that sort of preparation and feeling comfortable in your environment, how much of that was from the amateurs? How much of that have you been aware of as you've gone through these sort of 15, 16, 17 fights?
Well, I definitely think that my amateur pedigree plays a huge role into my success. I mean, I think where women's boxing is now, it's pretty much impossible to compete with these women at this level if you don't have that amateur pedigree. So that's taught me a lot. But things change when I turn pro. You know, you basically go from being under USA Boxing and everything that they have for you, everything's sort of taken care of, and then you turn pro and you got to find your own team and you got to structurize your own training camps and everything. So, but I feel like I've done a really good job at that. I've surrounded myself with a great team, the best team, amazing. No one causes any problems in my camps. No one has any ego, and we have a system that works really well. And we've had 17 times to go over that, perfect it, and practice it. So, yeah.
Was there any one point along the journey so far as a pro where you thought you were aware you'd become more comfortable with everything? It all clicked into place.
Maybe not one specific moment, but not one specific moment. You want to know why? Because the one consistent thing that I've had is Coach Al. And he's so old school and such a perfectionist that he doesn't change things up. Like, we may have like minor, okay, we're going to change this, change that. But there's been a few times where like Coach K was like, hey, let's do a couple weeks of our training camp in Vegas this time. Coach Al was like, nope, we're not switching anything up. We're not going to break what isn't, we're not going to try and fix what isn't broken. And so as we've perfected everything, we've obviously perfected everything as these big fights to get bigger and bigger and bigger. But I don't know. He's always just kind of kept me grounded and kept things like the same.
I suppose that in a way, and boxing can be repetitive. Boxing training can be repetitive. How do you remain energized and enthusiastic throughout all of that?
You got to break. Coach Al is very, very adamant about breaking me after my fights and letting me rest. And he's not worried about me physically. He's like, go to the gym a couple times a week, get your runs in, do your lifts, but you know, a couple times out of the week. Like, you don't need to be going to the gym every day, twice a day in between camps. You just don't have to. He's not worried about me physically. He's worried about me mentally. He's seen fighters, you know, he's a 3-time Olympic coach. He has 13 world champions that he's raised from kids. And so he knows what it's like to peak an athlete, and he's seen athletes get burnt out. And he doesn't want that for me. So, he forces me to rest. Sometimes I feel like I'm taking too much time. He's like, don't worry about it. We're going to get into camp and we're going to go hard and we're going to peak you like we always do.
That's interesting. So what, in a sense, balance is what he's preaching.
Balance, yes. I feel like I've lived one of the most balanced life as an athlete. Like, I really, really do.
So paint a picture of that. What are your outside interests? What are your grounding things that you do or use?
Well, this stage of my life is a little bit different. Like, in between camps now, I'm still doing media. I'm commentating now. I'm coming out here to the UK. I'm doing commentary for Sky Sports. I'm doing commentary for ESPN in the United States. So it's kind of like a break for me physically. I'm still able to be around boxing and critique it and study it, but I'm sort of on the other side of the rope. So I find that good and educational for me, but also kind of a break and something different. I'm also renovating my house right now. I'm super into like doing that and redesigning my kitchen and my bathroom and all stuff like that. I live in the mountains. I love doing nature stuff, taking my dogs out, and just living like a peaceful life, going to visit friends and family and doing fun things and concerts and stuff in between fights. And that way I know that, like, because I know once I get into training camp, everything is zoned in and focused, but you got to have balance. You got to enjoy other things in life, because that's what's going to make you hungry to get back in the ring, right? I think Katie Taylor said that she took 3 days off after her Serrano fight. I'm like, why? Yeah. Like, why?
Well, and interestingly, because watching that fight was nuts.
Yeah.
As a fight. I mean, actually, Boxing News the week after had the headline "Fight of the Century" as a nod to Ali against Fraser in the Garden as well. It was a nuts fight. You had a fight that was a bit like that against Hamadouche, and why did you fight like that? It was great to watch, but why on earth did you fight like that?
I felt comfortable fighting like that. Listen, Hamadouche is a really great pressure fighter, right? Like, to say the least. Okay, she's a great presser fighter, and she stopped most of her opponents because what do? They tried to get on their bike, they tried to move, they tried to keep her on the outside, and we knew, although we can box on the outside, there was gonna be a time when we were gonna go up against an opponent who was gonna be able to close that space, and we knew Hamadouche was one of those fighters. And so Coach Al couldn't just rely on me boxing and moving. He's like, I need to make you a complete fighter. I have to teach you how to fight on the inside, because when she gets in there, you got to fight her back. You got to dig to the body and you got to fight her back, and you got to make her afraid to sit in there with you. So that's what we did. And although I didn't expect to sit in there that much, I felt comfortable in there because we trained so hard. I felt comfortable in there, and honestly, I was relaxed. And if I would have been pulling out and trying to move, I would have been caught in the end of her punches, circling up against the ropes in a position you don't want to be, not in the center of the ring. And I just feel like it would have been an ugly, sloppy fight. So I decided to sit there and bang it out with her, and it's good. And I mentally know that I can do that. Now the world knows that I can do that. I'm a very versatile fighter, and I can fight in all areas of that ring, and that just makes me a triple threat.
Did you enjoy it?
Yeah.
Could you?
Yeah, that was fun. Honestly, I like banging it out on the inside. It's fun for me. Obviously, it's not everyone's like, oh, well, don't fight Alycia that way. Well, obviously, I'm not going to fight anyone the way I fought Hamadouche. Hamadouche is a very particular style and particular type of fighter. But if we do have to go into deep waters, I know I can. I've been there for 10 rounds, right? So I know I can do that, and that's a good thing to know about myself.
She hasn't had to. In fact, she's only done 1 10-rounder last time out.
Really? I didn't even know that.
Yeah. I asked her that question. Did she think she has it in her to do what you did against Hamadouche? Do you think she has?
No. I think Hamadouche would have destroyed Baumgardner. Baumgardner likes to be comfortable and sit on the outside. The one time she was pressed was when she fought Christina Leonardo, and she doesn't like getting hit. She crumbles when she gets hit. She falls all over the place. Her style is slick from the outside and being a counterpuncher in her safe zone. So I don't think she has what it takes to do that. And I know that our fight is going to get to that. I know there's going to be moments where I'm going to take it to her. And so we'll see. But I haven't seen her do it. She hasn't had to, but she's going to have to on Saturday.
The rivalry between you has been quite bristling from the outside looking in. Mm-hmm. How much of that is real? Because it seems like it is from her side. Do you feel it too? To describe that to me.
No, this is not fake. I think that everything that we've said to each other, we genuinely mean. I can tell you more so me than her, because everything that I've said is I'm just stating facts, right? I called her out because she was a champion. That's what champions do, right? Like, being the champion and the challenger that I am, I wanted to fight and unify these belts. So I called her out, and she didn't like that. She took it personal, started low blows and digs. She talks about things that are completely irrelevant, the way I look, my team, my body type, and just dumb things. Like, I've never, ever, ever once, and nor will I ever, about any of my opponents even do those type of low blows. It's just not my style. I'm talking about facts here. I'm talking about fighting. I'm talking about what you've accomplished. I'm talking about your styles, right? So yeah, it is what it is. She talks a lot, but we'll see if she can back it up.
I sense with her, a bit like Conor Benn, who I spoke to a few weeks ago, Conor admitted to me that he needs, perhaps because of his background, he wasn't a born fighter, even though he fights like one and he's bred to be one, but he finds motivation from somewhere. It might be a word someone said, it might have been a comment, it doesn't matter. He'll latch onto it and he'll use it, and that's what motivates him. And I think there's a little bit of that in her. She's talked about silver platter, privilege, I think was one of the words she used regarding you. Do you think that's unfair of her to latch onto any of that?
Well, I would like to know exactly what she means by that, because I keep hearing her say that too.
I think she means Olympian. Well, she's joining the dots. I think she thinks Olympian, top rank, contract,
So
away you go.
I fought my way. I'm in a great position. Don't get me wrong. I'm in an amazing position. I have an awesome promoter. I'm fighting on ESPN. I'm getting big fights and a lot of exposure, but I fought my way there. I didn't walk into a boxing gym until I was 17 years old. This girl started when she was 8. Like, getting to these tournaments, I would bust my ass waitressing, stacking up my money to get to these tournaments. All 3 or 4 of us girls would be crammed into these rooms at nationals. Like, we all hustled. None of us had a silver platter on our way up to this sport. Now, I knew that I wanted to make an Olympic team, and I stuck it out. And I was in 2 Olympic trials. I lost the first one. I crawled my way back, won the second one. She wasn't at either one of those. I've never seen her on a national team. She's never made it to the top as an amateur. And so she's just mad. She's just jealous that I had half the time and accomplished double what she has in half the time, literally. And if she wants to call it privilege or whatever, like, she's just overlooking everything that I've worked for. And she's mad that she was sitting around bullshitting. I don't know what she was doing in her little town, Ohio, Detroit, wherever she's from, sitting around bullshitting while I was hustling, working, and busting my ass to get to these tournaments and make it on this national team. I don't know what she was doing, but she didn't have the grind that I did. And so she's just mad that I made it and she didn't until now.
And you talked about the work that you've been able to do to give you a bit of balance, doing the TV work. You were over for the Fury fight at Wembley. You'll have seen the British fight night atmospheres from watching on the telly before. How did what you'd seen on TV, what you'd heard, compared to what you actually got to experience pretty close up, albeit in a pretty unusual, spectacular setting?
Yeah, I think that it's like even hard to compare, because my first experience here was at a Tyson Fury fight. And I kind of waited a while to get to my seat, and that's probably the biggest mistake. I'll never do that again, because I was stuck in a mosh pit. I almost did not make it to the ring. Those fans were insane. Like, I have a video of me just squished between people trying to make it, and I was like, no, I'm not missing this fight, and I just hustled my way to the front. But they went crazy. They're so energetic here and hype, and I think the word I'm looking for is like maybe a little bit more free-spirited, and I can like totally relate to that, because I feel like I'm a free spirit. I come from a little hippie family. We're just super laid back and don't take everything so seriously, and I feel like maybe Americans can be a little too serious sometimes, and I just don't get that vibe over here with the Brit fans.
And do you think the fact that you had a little sample of that kind of atmosphere, do you think you needed that perhaps ahead of Saturday night, given there's going to be a big crowd, hopefully knocking on for 19,000? Did it help you, in other words?
Maybe not that. You know what really kind of inspired me and pumped me up was being at the Taylor Serrano fight and witnessing that type of energy, and just being like, wow, this is so amazing that these 2 women were able to bring this type of crowd together. And yeah, it makes me excited for doing the same, or attempting to do the same. I know that was like on a grand scale, and man, they sold out the Garden. That's amazing. But I really feel like this is going to be a huge atmosphere too, and so I'm excited to experience it. Yeah.
I mean, you never, as a fighter, as a sports person, want to look too far ahead. Mm-hmm. But I want to do that in a couple of ways. One, Amanda Serrano, and she's emblematic of what's going on a lot in women's boxing, or more and increasingly in women's boxing, and that is transitioning between weights to make the big fights. Serrano's extraordinary over here. Natasha Jonas and now Terry Harper are going to do the same. You've definitely got the length and physique to be going up in weight. There's no doubt about that. Does that appeal to you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Why do you think I pushed so hard to get this fight done this year? Baumgardner wanted to wait. Oh, you need to wait. I'm the champ now. I'm going to enjoy my time. And if you want to fight me, you need to come over to Matchroom. Well, yeah, right. Okay, come on. So we got this fight done in 6 months after that she became champion. And there's a reason for that. I want to move on to other challenges. Like, I've been at 130 for my entire career. And I know there's other people that I want to take on. I've almost cleared out this division. Obviously, I want to go undisputed, and I'm going to work to get that done again ASAP by the end of the year, or early January. And then, I want to move up to 135 and challenge myself against the likes of Katie Taylor, and then 140, and then 147. I did the hard work by collecting the belts at 130. Looking ahead, let's say I've collected all the belts at 130. The belts at 35 are collected. The belts at 40 are collected. 47, they're collected, or they're going to be collected at 40 soon. But I feel like, for me, it could be big fights only from here on out. I can, like you said, I have the body type to go up to these divisions. The talent is there. The big fights are there. The names are there. I just want to go tackle them all and challenge myself to the most possible, in the most ways that I possibly can before I hang the gloves up.
And the good news, it seems like all the women fighters, the better, the elite women fighters want to make those fights because the depth isn't quite there yet. They almost have to. So you could be in, whether you're having 1 or 2 fights a year, busier the better for us boxing fans, but you could be in a couple of big fights for the next 3 years. Is time on your side?
3 years. I got a 3-year contract. I just extended my contract with Top Rank for 3 years. I'll be 35 and I'll be done. So my goals are big fights only. Let's go. Let's get these done. I'm not trying to do 2-year build-ups. I don't think boxing needs that. Let's fight. The fans want to see it. I think to keep boxing's we're on a roll right now, right? Let's keep it going. And the only way to do that is to let these rivalries build up for a reasonable amount of time, not an extended amount of time, and fight.
So what's your roadmap look like? Who's on the mayor hit list?
In a perfect world, Baumgardner, Choi for undisputed, Katie Taylor. Okay, let's go there. 3. So Baumgardner, Choi, Katie Taylor. Those are my, ideally in that order. Boom, boom, boom. So ideally by the end of 2023, I'll be undisputed at 130 and 135.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Right? Would you guys like to see it? I'm pretty sure if the fans want... I feel like I built up... I'm not talking insane. I've waited to say these words, right? But we're getting to that point where, I'm right on the pound list, right under Katie Serrano and Claressa. I'm up there. I feel like Katie Taylor's a champion. She wants to challenge herself against the best, too, and I feel like we make sense.
And so just taking that one step further beyond you and this clutch of really talented elite women fighters that are around right now, and 4 of them are on the bill coming up at the weekend. In another 10, 20 years' time, how does the women's side of boxing, how do you envisage that looks?
Oh, my gosh. Well, this era has done so much. We've made strides. We've surpassed so many people's expectations. It's great. Obviously, it is moving a lot quicker here in the UK. And people may not understand that. People may think that America isn't about it, or we're not doing a good job, but it's just harder in America. The market is tougher there, and I've been working on it. But we're on the right path. Top Rank just signed Sinisa Estrada, so they have 2 female in their stables now, or 2 females in their stable now. It may not seem like a lot to everybody else, but that shows okay, we're moving in the right direction. So I think 20 more years. Oh my God, I can literally look at young women now and I can say there is a future for you in this sport. Whereas, God, if I said it before, I was lying. I didn't really believe it because it took more than just being a good fighter to make it in this sport. It still is. There's still plenty of women who are great fighters and don't have the career that they deserve. So I'm hoping that in 20 years, if you're a good fighter, you're going to have the opportunities that the men have. These young men have been groomed. You see a young Shakur Stevenson in the gym, and these guys are taking him under their wings. They never had to work a day in their life. They're you just go to the gym, you just train, you're going to be our Olympian, you're going to be our millionaire world champion. And I feel like that is going to be more possible for women too.
Well, it's probably not that long ago. It's amazing when you think about it. But this is probably true. It's probably not that long ago that women like you were discouraged from going into to gyms, weren't really accepted around the other male boxers in that gym.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, they just allowed, the first World Championships was like, what, early 2000s, and then obviously leading us into the Olympics 2012. But when I first started, there weren't other women in the gym. People used to think I was just a model in there, like working out. I'm like, no, I actually fight. I'd ask for sparring. There's no women. The men would say, I don't spar women. And it was just like a constant struggle. I remember standing in line at the weigh-ins one day, and some older man came up to us, and they're like, you guys know there's no future for you in this sport. Like, go to school, be a doctor, be a scientist. Don't box. Like, really. And honestly, you can't blame them. Like, they were probably like right at the time. There was nothing for us. But I just always believed that I would be the exception in some way, that I would change that.
And in what way do you think Saturday night's going to have an impact? An all-female card. I mean, I know Katie said explicitly to Eddie Hearn she didn't want something like that for herself, interestingly. But
why?
I think because I think her view is she just want to be treated the same, always the same.
Okay.
But this is a unique event.
Eventually, but you can't just go from the inequality that exists to completely equal and the same. Yeah. Like, there is a bridge to get there, right? And little victories like this and iconic moments like this are helping to close that gap of inequality. They're important. So it's just kind of naive to think that we're just going to wake up one day and be equally treated as the men. Like, it's not going to work that way to continue to like make a statement.
Absolutely. And what kind of statement are you going to make on Saturday night?
Well, I'm here to show that I am the best in this division, one of the best in the world, and that I am one of the most versatile boxers out there, that I can adapt to all different styles, that I am very highly skilled, and that I'm levels above Baumgardner. And like I said, I'm going to take her into an area of a fight that she's never been into, and we'll see how she performs. But I absolutely plan on coming out of that ring with an extra belt in my hip, and one step closer undisputed. I have no doubts.
And then back to balance. Final question: what does balance next week, the week after, look like in Colorado?
Just back, honestly. Like I said, I'm in the process of renovating my kitchen, so I'm gonna go back, hang out with my dogs. My dad's in town, so that's great. He's out there babysitting right now, the pups, and just gonna enjoy some nature, enjoy some fun house renovation stuff, and we'll see. I didn't plan too much for after this fight. Such a big fight for me. I was like, I'm not gonna like plan anything big. I'm just gonna really just zone in and focus, and yeah. So we'll see.
Well, Matt, with Mayer, so engaging, so interesting, and so open to conversation and discussion. She's a fascinating interviewee, Mikaela Mayer. She's confident. She knows what she is. She knows what she isn't. She has a very clear goal of where she wants to be. She's aware her time as super featherweight is limited, but she wants to tie up the loose ends, win all the belts, and then move on to get the bigger fights up in weights, maybe up 2 weights, maybe more. So she has clear goals. I suppose what I did get from her was off air a very honest approach of the weight challenge 5 weeks ago, the challenge of making weight, which is getting more difficult. The weight checks over here very different to anything she's ever experienced stateside. That's why she came over last time a good 10 days early. That's why she's come over 9-10 days early again. So it is the same challenge. Normally she said she would crash weight very much the night before on the day. That's how she's always done it. So she's having to do it differently. I wonder if that's going to be a positive or a negative. I don't know. I wouldn't say she's weight drained. I would say she's weight challenged. And it's going to be interesting to see if that has any bearing on the fight and her performance.
It's a worthwhile discussion point, particularly if she's had to do it twice in 5 weeks. I don't know if that's going to have any bearing on her performance or not. But it's certainly worth keeping in mind if she if she just looks completely out of sorts from the moment the first bell rings. You would hope that it doesn't have an effect on a fight, because on paper this is a terrific matchup. I think this has got the potential probably to be a more exciting and more appealing and more competitive fight than perhaps the main event. But yeah, the issue of weight, we talked about it in depth 5 weeks ago. And it kind of goes back to when I said at the start, whereas there's often when I was talking about Kambosos and Haney, there's often reasons that we don't know about before performances. There's so many things that go on in training camp, so many hurdles that suddenly appear and then have to be cleared in preparation, so many injury niggles, worries about making weight and what have you, that we just never ever know about. And the situation with Mikaela Mayer trying to make weight, and I go back, and I know I keep saying it, but the fact she's having to do it twice in 5 weeks, I think it wouldn't be such an issue for me, or a potential issue, if essentially she'd gone back and started again. So instead of it being in 5 weeks, it had been in 12 weeks. So her body would almost act as if she'd had that fight, she'd had that release. There was no pressure for a week or two to be kind of making weight, but she will have for the last 5 weeks. This is the same for everybody on the card, by the way. It's not just Mikaela Mayer who's having to endure these kind of problems. But I think for Mikaela Mayer, who... it's clear for a while that super featherweight has been a struggle for her, that having to do this again 5 weeks later could play a part in the contest. It's a difficult fight to call, regardless. Mayer on the surface is the more experienced, the more complete fighter, I think. Baumgardner is... when she is in her groove, she looks... very impressive indeed. Almost flashes of like Roy Jones Jr. in Baumgardner. Whether she will find it difficult, however, to execute what she wants to do against someone as drilled and technically good as Mayer is another question. And I think if you're picking Baumgardner in this, you're probably going to pick her to win via stoppage. But you are kind of, I think, reliant on the weight issue proving to be a detrimental factor for Mikaela Mayer.
Okay, well, I also managed to spend some time with Alycia Baumgardner, very self-confident, very much believes in herself, and really, as you'll hear from this interview, feels a sense of destiny, that she's always been building towards this moment or moments like these. And you'll also hear that through her father, she's really been designed, she's been built, she's been brought up for these moments. Here's what she had to say. Alycia, this is a big fight. Does it feel any different? How does it feel in fight week for you?
This week, it just feels like another victory to win, another step forward for women's boxing, for boxing, and for my career.
You've been over to the UK a couple of times already. How much has that kind of experience over here helped you?
A lot, I've been able to adapt to the time change, and, enjoy the UK fans. They love boxing. And so this just feels like my second home, and I feel comfortable and, again, ready for Saturday night.
A lot of Americans, particularly in boxing, a lot of American boxers have talked about sort of UK fans and that atmosphere and what they bring. What have you seen, both from watching on the telly, but also getting to places like Manchester as you have your last couple of fights?
Yeah, I feel like the UK fans are diehard boxing fans. They respect the sport. They respect the fighters. Even though I beat Tyr in her hometown, they still respected what I did that night and, again, gave me props. So, they love the sport of boxing, which I think is dope. And it just uplifts the fighters, just to see that these people are coming out not only to represent boxing, but women's boxing as a whole.
And that, over the last couple of years, has just skyrocketed. It's been absolutely amazing to be part of that and to be one of the kind of leading figures in that. Take us inside that experience.
Yeah, I've been dreaming of this moment, becoming a world champion. I did that, and next is, unifying the division and making legacy, being a story for the younger generation to look up to, and to be that one of the faces for women's boxing is awesome, because everybody has different stories, different backgrounds, and if I can motivate one, you can motivate many. So that's why I'm here. And
you feel that right now we're in the thick of a generation of women who are doing that. But for you, when you were a kid, I suppose they weren't necessarily there. So who were the inspirations for you?
My inspiration was, the people in front of me, the people who laid the groundwork, and really myself. I told myself at a young age I wanted to be great at something, and I stuck to that. And, my parents pushed me. My dad pushed work ethic and hard work, and that my hard work will pay off one day. And from 8 years old, now 28, here I am fighting for the unifying the division. So it's been great. I've been at it since then.
So you wanted to be great at something. Why boxing? What was the pull for you for this sport?
I have a competitive spirit. I started wrestling when I was 5, and just being able to wrestle a guy and be on the mat, that just built the confidence in me as a young girl. And so when I stepped into the ring, I'm like, this is nothing different. This is competition. This is, your competitive nature to be the best at something, and to be a name for yourself. And that's exactly what I did. I have an underdog story, and I fight for those people who necessarily didn't have the light right away, who didn't have all the opportunities, but had the work ethic to keep moving forward.
And that's interesting, the wrestling side of things, because you're kind of known as a boxer, and very much an athletic boxer. We've not seen that kind of up close and using that Ricky Hatton style or whatever from you.
Yeah, no, wrestling has been a great background, a great tool for boxing. And again, Saturday night, if it gets to an in-close section or inside fight, you will see a lot of some good wrestling tactics there that's used. But all-around athlete, born athlete, I'm made for this.
Could you have done any other sport?
Yeah, absolutely. I ran track, was going to actually run track for college, and I had to make a choice. It was either boxing or track, because, going to a college sport was a lot and dedicated a lot of time, but so did boxing. And so at that time, I'm like, I've been boxing for a little longer, and I'm like, I'm gonna choose boxing, and here we are.
Boxing is hard. It is so hard. Have there been times through those years that you've ever doubted your decision?
Very hard, but never doubted my decision, because I knew I was going to be great. I knew, again, I had the faith. I was faith-driven to say, if I keep working hard, something's going to come from this. And because I know I have a talent, and it's a God-given talent, I have to make sure my assignment is done. And it's never done. The work is really never done. So
in boxing, you never really complete the game, I suppose. That's fair, isn't it?
That's very fair. Boxing is just how, it's just a fighting, when you have that fighting spirit, you just want to keep going. But sometimes you have to be realistic with yourself and say, okay, what can we do now?
Where's that mindset come from?
It comes from just the what my dad instilled in me when I was a young kid. And, I would say going to church, very faith-driven, and just understanding it's not so much about me. It's about my assignment and what I'm here to do for God's glory. That's how it's more faith-based for me. I'm here for a reason. My steps are ordained. This was supposed to happen. So here we are. You think there's a fate to it? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Because when you hear of Alycia Baumgardner, you're going to know that name rings a bell, and it tells a story. And it tells a big story about a girl who worked very hard to get to the top and had the faith to do so, even when she had, trials and tribulations in front of her. She kept going. So what is your story then? Because your parents are coming over, mum and dad are coming over to the UK for the first time to watch you fight. First of all, what does that mean to you? It means a lot. I was able to actually fly them here. So to be able to bring my parents and take care of them in a way that I've been wanting to take care of them. It feels good that I'm able to do that I'm able to provide for my parents. So they're excited. They haven't seen me fight in a long time, and for them to come to a country and to see their daughter perform, they're going to be in awe. I know they're excited.
So what is your? Oh, that's what I was going to ask you before. Kind of, you've told us about what them being here means to you, but what does your boxing story mean to them generally?
I think to them it means that they did a great job as parents. They know that, my dad was texting me last night, and he was just like, I seen it in you as a young kid, and I kept pushing you. I know there was times that you hated me, but I knew there was something great, and we just kept pushing you, and look where we are now. And so I applaud my parents for keeping that work ethic in me, and making sure that I didn't backslide, and then I kept moving forward.
And I was sort of thinking earlier on about, for me as a fan, I can go on Saturday night with my mates, and we can be in the moment, and we can really enjoy that, and we can say we're part of something, and this is something special, and we're just going to go and enjoy it. How can you do that at all? Given you've got to go and do a job, you've got to be professional. Can you be in the moment and actually soak it in and enjoy it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think being here, I've been very anxious, just getting over. I'm like, I need to get there. I need to be there, be in my element. And yeah, enjoying the moment and really taking in and soaking in the blessings that come with the sport and the things and accomplishments that I have been able to receive. Living in the moment is important. You're able to reflect. And I always reflect on my life. And so I've been able just reflecting. And, come closer to the fight night, it's going to be even better.
So you're kind of taking stock of what you've been through, the hard work that you've put in, all the moments that have got you. You're aware of where you've been, but you're aware of what a big opportunity this is.
Very aware. Yep, very aware of where I started, where I came, and where I'm going. And because of that, I'm able to just grasp the moment, understand my assignment, understand why I'm here, and take full charge of that. Grab a hold of it, not just some of it, but the whole thing. And when you do that, you're able to experience a bigger experience. That's
interesting, where you're going, because it kind of feels like you're just getting started. I mean, the Terry Harper performance in 21 that was your breakout moment, really. Last time out, did you feel you got an opportunity to build on that? How would you read the performance, the fight against Matisse?
Yeah, it was a building performance. Boxing is all about building. You're not always going to get the knockout. And for my mentality, I can't go in there like I'm getting the knockout, because the knockout doesn't always come. Let me do what I'm best at. Let me win and get that win, however that looks like. And that's exactly what I did. Boxing fans are very critical. Boxing fans are very opinionated, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, I know what I'm doing. I'm a professional at my sport. I'm a professional at what I do, and that's what we did.
Boxing fans aren't they? I mean, they're the greatest sports fans, but they're the harshest critics too. How do you deal with both sides of that?
I laugh. It's very comical. If I have time, I'll write to people. But it's just a good laugh. It's just an opinion. And one thing about boxing, you can prove the doubters wrong. And when you do, it's the sweetest feeling ever.
That performance against Matisse, you won, defended your belts. You won it pretty much every round, every moment. You did, I think that was 10 rounds for the first time. What did that feel like? What does that give you coming into this one?
Again, it gives me experience. I think every fight is telling. It sets up for your next fight. So if the first fight told me I can knock somebody out in the fourth round, the second fight told me I can go the distance, what does this third fight tell you? It tells you she can do both, And I would say that fight, I pitched a shutout. That was my first time that I won every round. And I was excited. At first, I'm like, dang, I didn't get the knockout. But when I looked at it, I boxed beautifully. And I did what I wanted to do. And that's one thing about boxing. You can do what you want to do when you're experienced.
Some of those fans are saying, some of the media are saying that this is a step up. Maybe some are saying it's a big step up. How do you view the task in hand? How would you answer that?
I would say that this fight is where it's supposed to be. People have to understand that I've been in this sport longer than Mikaela. I've been grinding longer than Mikaela. And it's just like a track meet, right? You can run against your district, but when you go to state, those people are still on the same level and maybe even faster than you. Then you see who's the best. So it doesn't matter, her platform or where she's been. We're meeting at the same pivotal moment right here. And I would say I'm better than her at that pivotal moment, at this pivotal moment in my career.
I suppose she might say she's had that really hard fight with Amadouche. You can read that in different ways. You can say she took too many shots. You can say there was a gut check, I suppose, is what they'd say. And people would say you haven't had that yet. Do you know if you've got that in you?
Absolutely. Again, fights are set up the way they're supposed to be set up. I would have never fought Hamadouche like Mikaela because the sport is hit and not get hit. And again, she got hit with too many punches. We want to leave with a clean face. And that's important, again, even for your health. And so when you're an experienced fighter, you understand how to fight those type of fighters. And so, again, I'm seasoned for everything. If I'm not getting in a fight, I'm getting in sparring. Believe that.
And that's an interesting point, because that's something that Matt and I on the podcast always talk about is, we want fighters to do well, to make money, and to get out nice and healthy. You were at Katie Taylor in New York against Amanda Serrano, which was a sensational fight. The Boxing News headline the next week said fight of the century, with a little nod to Ali against Fraser one, and way back when. So that's kind of what we're talking about. Do you want to be in one of those hard fights, really? Or do you just sense that you never need to be?
It's only hard if you make it hard. Again, I think when you're a prepared fighter, when you understand the fighter in front of you, you have to do what you're best at. You know what I mean? And every fight is going to be a challenge. Don't get me wrong. This fight is a challenge come Saturday night, but I understand what this challenge brings and what I'm great at. And that's what I'm going to put my foot forward with.
So I'm getting the feeling or the sense that maybe you don't think Mayer necessarily has the kind of attributes to draw that out of you.
She is definitely going to draw it out, because the one thing about this fight is because there's animosity there, because she thinks she's better than me, I have this different type of hunger. Like you're gonna see this different animal, and yeah, she's gonna bring the best out of me. So I would say so.
So that's real. All of that stuff between you and she. It's not something you're looking for motivation. It's just there.
It's just there, yeah. I just believe this girl, I've been wanting to fight her since the amateurs. I literally had my mind set on this girl. I need to fight that girl. Everybody thinks she's good. What is special about her? Never got the chance, but again, timing is everything, and I believe now we're in the pro world. When she turned pro, when I was already a pro, I'm like, this is perfect. I'm going to get that fight, and here we are.
So really, a bit like Holyfield and Tyson, who almost seemed like they were on a collision course. In your mind, you were always looking forward. Have you been are you a fight watcher? Have you been studying her?
She's been on the platform. She's been given the platform to be seen. So I've been able to watch her progress after her turning pro. And I'm like, yeah, I know everything I'm supposed to do. Again, I didn't have the light. I've been working in the shadows, in the dark, and that's totally fine with me. But when you step out into those lights, you will see a well-seasoned fighter, and I'm going to shock a lot of people.
Mindset. Do you have to? I've spoken to a lot of male fighters who talk about getting into the zone and almost having to go to quite a nasty place mentally just to be in the moment as a fighter. Do you need to do that at all?
No, it just naturally comes. So I'm naturally in my zone. The animosity is real. So I don't have to get myself even more worked up because it's already there, and so it's just performing at this time.
Nerves at all?
Nerves? I wouldn't say nerves. I would just say excitement, because I'm going to shock the world.
I suppose the will, you've had a taste of the British crowd, but it's going to be something else on Saturday night. That place holds 19,000. It's going to be busy. It's going to be raucous. It's going to be interesting. How do you feel about all of that? How do you think you're going to feel about all of that on the night?
This, again, I believe in timing and being at the right place at the right time. I was at the Katie Taylor fight at the right place at the right time, also doing commentary, and just being in that atmosphere. I seen what I was going to be stepping into next. I knew I was going to be in that type of atmosphere sooner or later, and it came quicker than what I thought. And so Saturday night, I will be in that moment in a stadium that's full of boxing-hungry fans, and again, it's going to be electrifying.
Final couple of questions then. You're talking about where you're going to be on the weekend, mentally and physically, where you're going in terms of your career. What about women's boxing? The rise has been meteoric, really, courtesy of a double handful maybe of good quality elite fighters. How do you visualize it, say when you're done and dusted and you can sit back and enjoy the sport from a different perspective? How is it going to be, say, in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time? What do you think?
It's going to be big. It's going to be talked about. When you mention Alycia Baumgardner, Claressa Shields, a Katie Taylor, you will understand that the sport of boxing has grown so much, and that women are being a part of boxing, not just separate from gender, but boxing. And so you'll be able to talk about boxing while mentioning women. Like that women's card in the UK was amazing. Those knockouts were amazing. You know what I'm saying? I think, as the sport grows, people want to see knockouts. It's exciting, right? And when women can do it, it's even more exciting. And that keeps the buzz in people's ears. So
what can we expect then on Saturday night?
You will expect an exciting fight. You will see a hungry fighter who's been chained up and who's been ready to be on the prowl. And with that comes danger. So you'll see a knockout, something crazy.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Fascinating speaking to her, Matt. Almost a bit like Tiger Woods and his father Earl, very much like Richard Williams and his multi-award-winning, championship-winning daughters, Serena and Venus, in the tennis world. You almost get the sense that Baumgardner has been given a similar career path, that she's been brought up and brought along very much with these moments and these boxing nights in mind. Although she said in that interview she perhaps could have done any sport. Wrestling was something that she was proficient at as well. She just feels this is her time, this is her sport, these are her moments, and on the weekend it's all going to come to bear.
She talks a great game. Yeah, I remember that interview. She talks a great game. You said earlier that you were going to stick with your prediction for Shields and Marshall. Does that mean you're going to go against your original prediction, which, memory serves me correctly, you were going for Mayer to win this one? Yeah. So are you about to tell me that you're going for Baumgardner?
I'm sticking with Mayer, but with deep reservations. And also looking at the betting, Baumgardner's 2-1 against. Mayer's sort of 4-11, nearly 1-3 on. I think that's too lopsided. I can understand why it is the way it is. Mayer should be favourite. She's the proven pedigree fighter, and she's been doing it in the amateurs as well as in the professional ranks as well. So it is a jump up from Baumgardner, who's really properly got to prove herself over 10 rounds. She's really got to properly prove herself at this level, although we've seen flashes, a bit like Marshall, we've seen flashes of brilliance in her, haven't we? The spectacular knockout of Terry Harper, which looks even better now, what we've seen from Harper in the last couple of weeks. So she might have what Hugh McIlvanney has described as the stuff before to me. She looks like she might have that, and I think she's too big in the betting. But I also think we got revealed in that interview that she's expecting the Amadouche version of Mikaela Mayer. She's putting a lot of her interpretation in stock in that version of Mayer. And as Mayer told us in the interview with her, she did that because she and Coach Al recognised that Amadouche can't fight on the back foot. So what do? Pressure, pressure, pressure. And that's why they fought on that. And that's why she took too many shots. But it was a means to an end. I don't think we'll see the same version of Mayer, even although she's suggesting to us in the interview that that's what we'll see in the second half of the fight when she's built the platform to do that. But I think before then, we get a boxing match. And anyone who thinks Mayer can't win a boxing match, I don't think they're reading this fight correctly. Mayer can win the boxing match and she can win a scrap. I just don't think she wants to put herself in a position where she's walking onto shots. And I think Baumgardner, to look at her best, is a natural counterpuncher. And I don't think Mayer's going to set the fight up in that way for Baumgardner to look as good as she did it against Harper. Now, that's not to say she can't and won't, because as I reiterate, I think she's got something potentially special in her, but we've only seen flashes of it. Are we going to see it on the weekend? Maybe. I'm just going to say no, and I'll go for Mayer on points.
I went for Mayer on points to win. I think when both on the podcast that never was and in the Boxing News preview, and we can speculate about what's happened in the last 5 weeks. We can ask them about what's happened in the last 5 weeks, but unless we've been there 24/7 for the last 5 weeks, we don't know if there is anything that is going to have occurred to change my point of view on it. So my point of view remains the same. I think Mayer is the more complete fighter. I think she's had more experience at this level, and I think she's going to win on points. But like you, it's not going to be the shock of the century if Baumgardner just announces herself as a potential superstar with a devastating victory. But for me, Shields on points, Mayer on points.
Okay, and let's finish with this idea, Matt. Because given what we talked about in the main pod, what we talked about in last week's pod, surrounding all the issues in and around Conor Benn's failed test, let's just leave it with this. I think it's fair to say the happiest and most joyous we've been on this pod was the podcast we did in reaction to Katie Taylor against Amanda Serrano. I probably haven't enjoyed a fight or felt about a fight in an event as I did in the wake of that one. That's how I want to feel about boxing. And that's how boxing can make us feel. Maybe this weekend will do it for us.
Let's not forget that that's what boxing can make us feel like. Let's not forget that. We can't. We can't forget that. And hopefully we will get a sense of that again at the weekend. But at the same time, what we can't do is allow it to paper over the problems that we've encountered. And too often that happens. Something will come along, another story, another fight that makes you forget about all the indiscretions in the past. It's still very, very important that we get to the bottom of the Conor Benn issue and we ask some serious questions about why that occurred and the manner that it occurred. Otherwise, it will happen again in a few months' time and we'll be back at square one, and we can't keep going back to square one. We can't. But yes, let's hope that this weekend's fights remind us why the sport is worth fighting for.
And it's because of those emotions and feelings that it engenders. It's because of the way that fights like Taylor Serrano can make us feel. And we can give endless examples over the course of the last 6 months, let alone 6 years. It's because of the way it makes you and I, Matt and I, you and I, all of us. It's the way it makes us feel about the sport and the way in which we love and respect the fighters. It's because of all of that that it's so important that the fighters themselves and the people around the sport, whether you're Eddie Hearn, Callis Ireland, it's because of all of those feelings that we share that it's important that they respect the sport. That's the most important thing of all to remember. Speak again next week. Bye for now.